Now that you've picked a prompt, you you know what you're going to be researching, you can start actually doing the research. And the source that you're required to use in every single entry is the book. And then you have the other two sources that you're picking from the prompt. So, we're going to start with talking about how to take notes on your book. And just in general, some things you want to keep in mind for taking notes from your sources for this project. You need to make sure that you are paraphrasing your information from your sources. Even when you're just taking notes, you want to start off by paraphrasing. Do not copy and paste any information from your sources. If you copy and paste into your notes, you are more likely to um, accidentally plagiarize in your paraphrases because you are going to end up changing less. Especially when it's when you're looking at sentence structure, um, you're more likely to do that sort of inappropriate paraphrase where you are just changing a few words. Remember, you're wanting to not just change the words, but also kind of the way that it's being said. You want to switch it up. So, in order to do this well, you really are best off not copying and pasting, even though I know it's a lot easier to get information from your sources into your notes that way. Just start off with the paraphrase, do that hard work of the paraphrase from the beginning, and then you will not have as much work to do when you are going to actually write your entry. So again, you do not want to copy and paste from your sources, and you're not going to see me doing that when I'm modeling this note-taking process for you. Now, that said, if there are phrases that you're unable to reword while you're doing this note taking process, I wouldn't get too hung up on it and I wouldn't avoid using that information. I would just put those few words, those few phrases that you cannot work and that you cannot put into different words that you're unable to paraphrase, I would just put those in quotation marks. So, again, anything that you're not able to paraphrase, any single words or like couple word phrases that you're unable to paraphrase, you're going to go ahead and just put those in quotation marks. If you don't do that, you've committed plagiarism. So, don't pretend to not have used any of the words because I'm telling you to paraphrase right now by not using quotation marks around words that you didn't change. The other idea is that each chunk of information that you're paraphrasing, you want to put in a different row on your table. So when you're taking your notes, you're going to be not just recording what the source says, but also what you think about that source, what you say. So we're using an it says, I say note taking format for this. And the nice thing about this is a lot of your ideas for your explanation you can kind of get down in your notes, and again, that's less work that you have to do when you're actually writing your journal entry. So when you are taking notes from a print source, I when I'm taking notes from a print source, I like to go ahead and annotate that copy of my print source. And since you can write in your books, that is what I recommend that you do. And I'm going to model that process for you right now. Um, So when you are trying to figure out what the book says about your topic, you can look in the index to see what pages that topic appears on. Now, the index is in the back of the book, and what I did to try to help you with this is in the module prompt, I underlined the terms that you would find in the index. So what I was finding is that every single topic is talked about, but the way that they word the topic in the research module doesn't always connect directly with something that is in the index. So I did underline the words and phrases that you want to look up in the index. So when I'm looking at my prompt, you can see there are two terms that are underlined. There is climate theory and there is curse theory. So these are the things that I can look up in an index to find out what pages he talks about them on. Now, since this is the research module for section 1, I am going to limit my discussion of climate and curse theory to whatever appears in section 1. So if there are pages that are listed for the topic that are outside of the section that you're doing the entry for, you can ignore that information. But I'm going to go ahead and paraphrase everything that the book has to say in section 1 about both climate theory and curse theory. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the index of my book. So again, this is in the very, very back. I am showing you a PD, the e-book version, just for the ease of being able to put this information in the video. And you can see when I look at the C's for climate theory that it talks about climate theory of race on page 12. So that's where I want to look. I want to look on page 12 of my book, and that is the easy way to find where the information is at in your book. So I'm going to then open my book to page 12, and I'm going to find where it's talking about climate theory, and I'm just going to read that to myself one time. So this actually came from Aristotle, who questioned whether Africans were born this way or if the heat of the continent made them inferior. Many of them agreed it was climate, and that if African people lived in cooler temperatures, they could in fact become white. So remember, we are talking about scientific theories, and we're trying to see how scientific theories about race helped to keep racism alive. So when I look at this, the next thing that I want to do is I want to figure out how many ideas I need to paraphrase in this. So I'm going to read through it again, and I'm going to try to figure out if there's where the units of thought are taking place. So I'm just reading through this another time. It looks like this is really just the definition of climate theory, but it looks like it has kind of two parts. One about the heat and what it did to them, and then there's another idea here about what would happen if they lived in cooler temperatures. There's kind of two parts to the idea. And I shared with you when we were talking about paraphrasing how it is very hard for me to hold a lot of information in my head at the same time. So I prefer to kind of chunk what I'm going to paraphrase and paraphrase one chunk of information at a time. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get out my highlighter, and I'm going to highlight kind of the key words in this idea. I'm going to try to isolate my key points. So it came from Aristotle. Said the heat of the continent made them inferior. And if African people lived in cooler temperatures, they could become white. So I have all of these big ideas. And now that I have isolated the big ideas, if I'm thinking about what you've been told about how to paraphrase, and let's just go peek at those notes really quickly. I have read the passage several times, so now I'm to the point where I think I want to put it away. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write down key concepts when I'm starting to paraphrase this. So Before I do that, though, there's an extra step that I like to throw in here for myself. Just again, knowing the way that my brain works, this helps makes this process a little bit less frustrating for me, and leaves me less stuck when I put the passage away and start trying to put this into my own words. Um, I like to look at the text and see if there's anything that I am kind of looking at and I already know I have no other language for that. So, the heat of the continent. I am not really sure. Like the heat of the continent, there's nothing coming to me about how to rephrase that. Basically, it's saying that it is a very hot climate or there are high temperatures, right? Okay, I finally got something. High temperatures. So I'm just going to kind of preload my brain with some alternative language. Inferior. I am not, I'm kind of stuck on that word inferior. So I want to come up with some other ways to maybe say inferior, like less than or lower in status. So again, I'm just preloading my brain with some ideas about how I can rephrase some of this stuff. I don't want to say cool, and it's not cold temperatures. So again, I'm kind of stuck. What if I said lower? So now I have preloaded my brain with some alternative language for talking about these ideas. And now I feel comfortable kind of putting this page away and starting to paraphrase. Now, since this is a print source, you are going to need to keep track of what pages the information is on because you will need to cite the page numbers with your paraphrased information. So this is coming from page 12, so I'm just going to add that it's coming from page 12. And then one of the tips that we were given when we were told, or when I taught you how to paraphrase, one of the tips was to maybe start from a different point. So I am still gonna start near the beginning of what it was. Like it did talk about Aristotle in the beginning, but it didn't start with his name. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with Aristotle. Climate theory. Claimed. And then I'm going to go on to try to put the ideas that made up his theory into my own words. So I'm going to pause the video for just a minute and I'm going to take a couple minutes to do that and I'm going to show you what I got. So I ended up with Aristotle's climate theory claimed that high temperatures in Africa made black people lower in status and that they would turn white if they lived in a climate with lower temperatures. And then I need to get to the I say. So, what do I think about this? And the way that I like to do my commentary, I like to use the voice typing tool so I can just kind of um, speak freely about what I think about the evidence. And then I look at what I have and I kind of refine those ideas. So I'm going to go ahead and go to tools and I'm going to select voice typing and you just click and then you can start speaking. So I'm going to think through the questions in the underneath I say to get my ideas about what this means. So this means that that people believed that where you lived could make you lesser of a human being. That the temperatures where you lived could make you less of a human being. Period. This matters because it establishes a factual basis for not treating Black people equally. It also seems like it would be easy to do more research on this and prove this wrong. It would seem like if this was true, then as soon as they started taking people from Africa, it would seem like if this were true, taking people from Africa to be slaves in other countries, we would see these people that we're taking turn into white people. And that didn't happen. Period. Okay, so now I have all of my kind of random ideas, my rambling on about what I think this means. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to read through it. I'm going to clean it up. So first, I think I'm just going to get rid of this first sentence because all it's really doing is saying exactly what the evidence already said. So I'm just going to get rid of that, and then I can say this matters because it establishes a factual, and I'm going to put quotation marks around factual because although they believed they were facts, we know that these are not facts. And then I just need to add some end punctuation. And I'm going to shorten this up by saying it would be easy to prove this wrong. If this were true, as soon as people Okay. So now I have if this were true, as soon as people started taking people from Africa to be slaves in other countries, we would see these slaves turning into white people. And that didn't happen. All right. So then I would move on to looking up curse theory in the index because it's the other thing that I need to talk about. If there were more pages about climate theory or that addressed climate theory, then I would look at to see what those pages said and paraphrase that information before moving on to the next topic. And I would add my commentary. And then at that point, I could move on to taking notes on the other two sources, the sources that are linked in the prompts.